Welcome. My name is Gena Timberman, and you are listening to Timber People, a podcast about people who, like timber, are strong, build and create, who gather us together like fuel that feeds fire. People who support structures of our community that uplift and protect. Welcome to the show. I'm so happy today to really welcome my friend, Darren Brown. I'm just so happy that you're here with us, the audience, and myself today. Welcome.
Hey, I'm so glad to be here. I know when you called me the other day and said, I got a spot, I said, I got to do this. I'm in. I will go to great lengths to make it happen.
Thank you so much. Well, I mean, it's intimidating and enjoyable and exciting to interview someone who's not only my friend, but someone who has interviewed me over the years. We were talking the other day, maybe over a dozen times or something.
Seems like it, yeah.
I know. And I want to say thank you up front for being supportive of our work. For one, overall, creating awareness and understanding of issues that affect Indian country, like the mascot issue, like other issues. Also, covering what's now the First Americans Museum along that entire journey.
That's a long road right there.
I know. And I met you many years ago, and you were working with one of the local TV stations and doing magnificent work. And here I'm thinking, this is awesome. You know, Native person talking to Native person about awesome things happening in this world around us, and covering, you know, what's now the First Americans Museum. And you know, we've been together, as you covered, like ground blessing ceremony for the museum, the state centennial, the Kansas City Chiefs. You joined us all at the Arrowhead Stadium, and that was a lot of fun, to the opening of First Americans Museum, and just really being out and about. And you're very recognizable with your name, your voice, with your face and your presence on different productions that you create. And I will say, you know, you're a producer, photographer, reporter at Cheyenne and Arapaho Television, also working with Cheyenne and Arapaho Productions. You are also doing freelance work for Discover Oklahoma, which is a statewide magazine show produced by the Oklahoma Tourism Department. And so you're all over the place, and you're inspiring. And I'm really excited to just dive into and talk about the passion for which you have for the work that you do and the communities around us. And so welcome. I'm just happy that you're here. Thank you.
I am happy to be here. And yeah, you're right. It is strange for us to be interviewing again, and we're not talking about the construction at the FAM.
Delays, construction, celebrations, experiences, issues.
I told someone the other day when I was coming in, I said, you know, I think I interviewed Gena probably at least a half a dozen times about.
Oh, more than that.
Yeah, and Shoshana probably.
Yeah, right,
twice more than that.
Right.
I remember doing stories about the construction and the stops and starts. And I remember, and every time it stopped, I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And then, but then it would restart, and I would do another story, and I was so. And I remember people back at the TV station where I was working at the time. They were like, "What's going on?" I'm like, I said, "I don't really know, but I'm gonna put the best face on it that I can." I said, people need to know that this is a really thing that needs to happen, you know. And you know, back then I didn't even know people like Kelly Haney. I knew of him, right. but all the people that had had hands in making this thing happen. And the great thing is I got to meet a lot of them just not long ago at the 2-year celebration.
Right.
But yeah, that's I've through that journey, I've met so many fantastic people like yourself, Gena.
Thank you.
And all the people who have, I said, come and go and come and gone again.
Right.
From the First Americans family, the First Americans Museum family. So yeah, you mentioned some things I'd forgotten about that. There was the ground blessing, and you know what? And I think I mentioned it to you or not, but the ground blessing was scheduled but it happened to be on the same day
right
as the very first
I already know what you're going to say.
Oklahoma City Hornets game.
I already know what you're going to say. We're like, it was November 1, which
Yeah.
is the beginning kickoff of Native Heritage Month.
Yes.
So we're still having it that day.
And I was scheduled.
We were here before the Hornets.
by a long time.
But I was happy they were here.
And I was scheduled to go cover the blessing. I was on it. And then they scheduled me to go downtown. And I said, well, I don't care, but somebody, I said, and I went and I strongly worded it, somebody better get the behind down there. And
behind.
Yes. And so we did have someone go down there, and I was like, thank you.
It was great, yes.
And, the grand opening, man, what a great... I can't even put that in words. Right. I only know this much of it, a very small part of it, but I can only imagine the people who are all involved, like yourself and all those people who spent all that time. Just, I can only imagine but now we got this done,
Right. Well, I say that I gave a lot to what's now the First Americans Museum, but I tell you what, it gave me so much more.
Oh, man.
The relationships and, like yourself, friendships and experience, and just it's, you can't measure that, the blessing and the gift of what it has given to me. And I will tell you, it was always it's so much different being on the other side of an interview with someone like yourself who knows, I knew you were very supportive, and you also have that very friendly, warm demeanor and a smile. And
you guys can't see me, but I'm smiling right now.
But that is a whole different experience than a lot of other interviews that we'd be giving at times. And so that's really special. So I appreciate that. Well, I want to talk about some of the more recent things that you have been producing. I know that you are working on a podcast more recently. We'll start with that and kind of work back. And I also want to touch upon, as well as your career journey, but your personal journey as well. But I'm excited, podcaster to podcaster, to know that you're doing this new podcast, and it's really awesome.
Yeah, I first of all had to give credit to my bud Hawk Hardico, I work with, and he had been kicking this idea around for probably over a year. And with where I work at Cheyenne and Arapaho Productions, we just do a lot of stuff at the tribes.
You do.
I mean, we cover events like groundbreakings or ribbon cuttings, but we cover MMIW stuff,
right.
And then it just goes on, which is great. I'll tell you this really quickly. We've been there for almost 12 years now, and I'll say that when we first started, we would be covering, some tribal event, and people would look at us because originally, I'm not a tribal member of that tribe, and the other guy who was with me at the beginning isn't either. They would look at us like, who are these guys, and why are they sticking cameras in our faces?
Right.
But I will tell you that now, 12 years later almost, it's very, there are kids that are there who have grown up with us being there the entire time. And for them, it's very, very normal for us to be sticking cameras in their faces. And if the tribes have an event and we don't go, people will say, hey, where's our TV? So it's, that's a really, that's touching,
It really is. Consistency and quality are important. Yeah. And I know that that's always been important to you.
Yeah. So the podcast, like I said, we finally got, some more equipment. And so Hawk it's really his baby. And then he said, I said, well, we heard like when we had the first one scheduled, he said, so you're going to sit right here. I said, oh, I'm doing it? He goes, well, who else is going to host it? I'm like, I don't know. He goes, no, man, you do everything here. So I'm kind of the default host. The great thing is, we have other people host too, and I'm totally fine with that because we are in the education department, and Indian education is it's a whole world that I know a little about, but when we've had a couple of podcasts that were kind of like deep dives into Indian education, and Carrie Whitlow,
right,
our executive director, hosted those, and I'm like, that you could have those because you as well as I do now, that to be a proper interviewer, you got to have a really good grasp of what you're talking about. I mean, the last thing I want to do is interview someone about, brain surgery because I know nothing about it, right? So,
right.
And then we have guys from this, it's called TOR, the Tribal Opioid Response Project. And these guys talk about res recovery and about well-briety.
Right,
and, truthfully, I mean, look, they're talking, some of these guys are recovering addicts. And that's just an experience that, I don't have. They've can talk about things that I couldn't. And so they come in, they do their own thing. And I'm like, that's fine. I do enough stuff. I don't need to be in front of a mic all the time.
It's like that flock of geese where one will go to lead the flock for the benefit of the whole. I think that is really important. And I know that you have a small team, many but mighty. You do so much. It's great. It's really impressive.
But this podcast, like I said, right now it's just called the Cheyenne and Arapaho Productions podcast, which sounds we keep saying we got to fix that, but we just want to brand it initially.
Well, awareness for what it is for Native and non-Native people alike.
And the idea is to highlight our tribal programs, but we want to expand it. We want to go hit Denver March, Gathering of Nations, and take the podcast with us and have more guest hosts. And we'll get there, but I'm just excited to be doing it.
Absolutely. Well, you're doing a great job, and you're starting really pioneering a new standard. I'm really excited about what Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes have been doing to support your leadership over the years. In 12 years, only Oklahoma tribally owned production capacity like that. That's really important.
Yeah, man, every time I don't think about it every day, but I've said it a number of times in front of our governor, our tribal governor. I said, there are, first of all, Cheyenne and Arapaho Productions /TV is the very first and only tribal owned TV station in the state of Oklahoma. And it's a low power educational TV station, but it's still a signal, and
consistent.
It's
and quality.
I tell you, when I left my job at that TV station here in Oklahoma City, and I went here, it was a little scary, but I thought to myself, man, who do you know that gets to go help start a Native American TV station? This guy right here.
Right.
And, and I said, no matter what happens, maybe it'll be a trivia question somewhere someday.
For the listeners, he's doing the jazz hands, jazz celebration hands.
Who were the guys who helped start the only, Native TV station in Oklahoma? There you go.
You're the right man. You're the right one. And to build your team and to give them support.
Yeah.
And I know that you're supporting young people, students, for their journey into this type of business, into broadcast journalism. And can you talk about that a little bit and what that means to you?
You talk about passions. And you mentioned it earlier, there aren't very many Native people working in the media in general.
Right.
And that covers newspapers, radio, television, and so on and so on. Thanks to Reservation Dogs and Rutherford Falls and Killers of the Flower Moon and things like that, people are being exposed to, not only Native actors, but Native filmmakers. But if you look carefully, it's still a very small number of actors. But we're glad that's happening. So it's because it's bringing attention to the things that we've been talking about forever anyway. So most of my career has been in television news. So I will say that, I through my association with, the Native American Journalists Association, which has now changed to the Indigenous Journalists Association, and what's the I can't think of the other organization, RTDNA, the Radio and Television Digital News Association. They put out numbers every year about women and minorities in the workforce in media, and they give out numbers for women, for Black Americans, Asian Americans, Hispanic, and Native. So, I mean, take a wild guess as what the percentage of Native American people working in television news is.
Probably 0.01.
Well, yeah. It's like zero. Well, it fluctuates from.
I'm glad it's a great 0.01.
Yeah, but it's still less than 1%.
Right.
And I suppose you can look at it and say, well, generally speaking, Native Americans are 2% of the population, so it's going to be a small.
When they're not calling us other,
so. But I tell. Matter of fact, we've got a Indian Youth Career Day coming up here soon, and I've been helping with that for years. And every chance I get, I'll talk to college kids and high school kids, Native kids about this. I think for whatever reason, it's broadcasting has not been presented as a viable career option, and I don't know why that is, but that needs to change. And I tell them all the time. I said, look, we're not. I said, if everybody in this building went out and got a journalism degree, or film studies, or media studies, or broadcasting, whatever, every one of us went and got a degree and went and get a job. That ain't going to move the needle, barely at all, if at all. I said, and I'm not fooling myself thinking we'll ever get to 20%, but by God, we should be able to get to 2, 3, or 4. You know what I'm saying? Let's make this happen. So I tell kids all the time. I said, do you think that there are too many stereotypes about Native people in film, radio, TV? They go, yeah. I said, do you think that there are a lot of great stories about Native America that aren't being told? They said, well, yeah. And I say, well, who do you think is going to tell those stories?
Right.
And usually someone will finally say, us. I got, yeah, you. We need every one of you guys because, Gena, I'm not getting any younger.
Right. Hey, you don't have to tell me, brother.
And so we've got it. My friend Hawk I was talking about.
Right.
He said we got to drop down that ladder. We got to. I said we got to build that pipeline. We got to bring in. We got to bring in the next generation, and the one
Absolutely.
before, the one after that, the one after that, the one. And we're there to help, teach, preach, help, whatever we got to do. But there's so much young talent out there in Indian country. We just got to figure out the best way to get them involved.
Right, and now the means are there with technology, and we have the capacity to tell our stories through what we're posting online and social media and the podcasts. And, we have to pave our own way. And I really appreciate that work that you're doing. And you appreciate that storytelling. I feel the same way about your industry, but also the career journey industry for museums. That first person Indigenous perspective is really so important, telling our own story. And so I really appreciate your commitment to that.
One thing you mentioned museums, I think, JPH, James Pepper Henry said it. And I've heard a number of people say it. When you talk about museums in general,
right?
I mean, they traditionally have not been, what's the word? They've not been the friendliest of places for Native people. And you see it now, it's happening all over the country, where Native displays, the ones that aren't great, that maybe we saw as kids are being removed and to be replaced with a more proper representation of our people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the work that you're doing to uplift that and to engage our young people, it's really great. It's really great. I want to talk also about you as a person. This podcast is about timber people. People like timber, they uplift and protect structures of our community, really that support who we are, but also build and create. And so I want to talk a little bit about your journey as a person, where you grew up. I know you're adopted and you're an incredible person with an incredible story.
Well, oh man, okay, you guys, I'm blushing over here. Okay. Well, thank you. I grew up in, if you ever heard of Frederick, Oklahoma.
Of course.
It's almost to Texas, way down south. And I was adopted. Here's the deal. So let's see, I'll see if I can knock this way down to a really small piece. My mother was born and raised in Cochiti, Pueblo, in New Mexico, a little south of Santa Fe. And she, later in her early years, she came to Oklahoma to work at an Indian hospital down in southeastern Oklahoma, where she met a man. They let's see, how shall I say it? They got together,
right,
in a friendly way.
They had relations.
And here, they had relations, and so here I am, right?
Right.
That's the short story. She's full Coach T. He's half Choctaw and half Caucasian. He was Caucasian. Hey, I love that line. A friend of mine gave me that a while ago, and I said I got to use it. And so the thing is, before he knew she was pregnant, she left that little town and came to Oklahoma City, and where I was born, and then she went back to work, and she put me up for adoption. And so I was adopted through an agency, a Catholic agency. And I was adopted by a Caucasian couple. And so that's what I grew up with down in the little town of Frederick,
right,
where everyone knew everyone.
Right, it's a great community. I know that.
Where my people would say, "Oh, there goes Mr. and Mrs. Brown with their cute little Indian boy," that type of thing. And well, I'm not going to. The truth is, my mother had issues having children.
Right.
The woman I call my mother. And so I was adopted. And matter of fact, I have an adopted sister as well. And I have a brother who actually, they did have a son. So I have it's funny, so even though my mother wasn't allowed to have, wasn't able to have children, she had one. So anyway, that's me. Yeah, we're all over the place. But I always knew I was adopted from day, as soon as I knew. Even as a kid, I'm like, hey, we ain't the same color. And, my parents did what they could. They didn't know much about my background. You don't know what you don't know.
Right. It's a different time, too.
Absolutely. And so it wasn't until I think I was in college that I really, really tried to find some stuff out. And I did. But you know what? I found out, an original birth certificate and things like that. But the truth is, and it's funny because, the internet these days is it's what's the word? Ubiquitous.
Right.
It's everywhere.
Right.
People don't even remember what life was like.
Well, that's why what I'm saying is a different world. Like, we didn't have the internet,
So really, I had some information that I had to sit on for years because I couldn't do anything with it.
Right.
And once the internet became available, I found out some stuff really quickly. And I had hoped to find a long-lost relative who knew the situation, but it turns out no one knew anything about it. And through I finding the last name, I just made a bunch of phone calls, and I finally, someone who said, "Well, I have an auntie who lives in Oklahoma," and I'm like, "That's got to be it."
Yeah.
And I had to make a cold call, Gena. Now you talk about intimidating and being nervous.
Well, you're a courageous person. It does take a lot of courage to do that.
Yeah. But the truth is, by then, I had been thinking about it for years. And I remember my wife was like, now, you got to be ready. She may not want anything to do with you. And I said, that's okay. I just want some answers, and so I called and, gave her I said, I was born this day, blah, blah, blah. I think you're my mother. And it was, silence, and I said, look, this is a whole lot to throw at you. And I apologize, but I said, I'll tell you what, let me just call you the same time tomorrow.
Oh, that's, yeah.
And she said, okay. And I called the next day, and then, she was crying, I was crying, everybody was crying. It went well. It went about as well as it could. And I told somebody one time, it was because they were asking me about it, and I said that conversation was a whole lot of her just pouring out all this guilt, and me just saying, well, that's not why I called you. I mean, I said, I said, look, we got to go forward. We can't go backwards from here.
Right.
And I'll tell you the wonderful, beautiful thing about all this was after we talked for a long time, she said, well, now I've got to go tell some people. So she had to go tell all the relatives. And, and hey, us Indian folk, we got all kind of relatives. So my phone was ringing constantly. Hello, Darren, this is your uncle. You got to come out and see us, Darren.
Oh, yeah.
That's how they talk out there.
Right.
That's pretty close anyway. And so I went out there and I, met everyone, and I got a name, and I knew her. That was in 97. She passed in 01. And but I knew we lived in Albuquerque for a short while, so we got to see her like once a month.
Right.
The last few years of her life, and my baby girl was born out in Albuquerque, and my biological mother, saw her. Shortly before she passed, and like I said, at the time, my son was about a year old.
Yeah.
No, he was a couple of years old. So she got to know him, and. Now, and here's another part of this is when I first met this woman, my biological mother, after all that shock had worn off, she said, well, do you want to meet your dad? I'm like, what you know the guy? She goes, yeah, he just lives down the road. They lived in this tiny little town. And at the time I met him, but he had married a Choctaw woman. They had a large family, and he at the time, he just I don't know. I didn't know how to properly connect with him, so I did speak with him a number of times, but I really just kind of let it. As I guess it's my fault. I just kind of let it go because I didn't really know him. But amazingly, that man. My biological father he adopted the children from this woman he married, but then they had one together. So I have a guy, a half brother, who is literally my brother from another mother. I mean,
Right.
And out of the blue, a few years back, he called me and he said, if you want to know, our dad, you probably should, because he's getting older and his health is getting worse, and so we made it happen. And the last few years, well, he passed just 2 years ago, and he was in his 90s, early 90s, and the great thing is we got to go spend some time with him, and he met my son, his only really blood relative grandson, and he met my daughter, and so that was really cool. And there's so much more to the story,
Right,
and I don't want to take up all the time, but I'll put it this way. So I grew up in let's say I grew up in a Caucasian world,
Right.
And then I found all this out, and that changes your perspective on a lot of things. So when this opportunity to work for the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes came up, even though I really didn't know much about the Cheyenne and Arapahos, when that happened, I said, man, I can't pass this up.
Right.
And and since then, I've met so many people that have a very similar story.
Right.
And they're close to the same age as me, and they were adopted almost in the same situations. And I'm like, who knows how many people like that are out there? People who did not grow up amongst Native people, really, and are only in their 40s and 50s, were really kind of now working in the Native community and really trying to learn. And there were sometimes truth is, there were sometimes I feel like, am I Indian enough, Whew, I'm going to get emotional here. But then I realized we are, I am. It's just, it's just not about we're look at me, I'm tearing up here. No, it's not about where you physically came from.
Right.
It's about, where you are inside, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, oftentimes people think about sovereignty as just pertaining to a tribal government or, nature, the wind, the water, the fire. We individually are also sovereign beings. We are a part of that natural kind of democracy in and of ourselves. And for one to tell their story, it is important. And it perpetuates community because you put out there that identity. And Indian people, humans, we all need that connection.
Absolutely, yeah. I will tell you, and then I don't want to, I don't want to, keep, going with this. We got other stuff to talk about, but I will tell you, when I told you I went out there to get my name and meet all of my relatives, and so I'd never been out there. I'd never been onto their reservation, their pueblo, and we're driving out there. We get off the highway. And I was with some aunts and uncles, I just met, and my biological mother. We were driving out there, and it was one of those days when the clouds were really low. It was just beautiful. I mean, I love New Mexico anyway. It's just I've been there many times, even as a child with my parents. We used to go out there and spend time out there, and I was like, man, it's really pretty out here, and. Then I just got this weird feeling, and I got really quiet, and because I'd been talking, if you have noticed, I like to talk a lot.
I love it.
So I was talking about, look at this clouds, look at
always
here.
Been grateful for that.
Look at this over there, and then I got really quiet, and I guess it was my uncle or my cousin, I can't remember. He said, "Hey, Darren, you all right?" I said, "Oh yeah." He said, "Well, you got awfully quiet," and I said, "Look, man, I don't know how to say this, but." Man, I feel like I've been here before. Mm-hmm. And he said, and he flipped out. He said, "That's not surprising." He said, "That's not surprising at all. I'm glad you shared that." And I tell people that, I don't want to, tell everybody that, but I'm like, we're in a spot here where, we're sharing here, but I swear that is the truth. I felt like I had been there before, and I had never stepped foot on that area before.
Your ancestors are with you. And I'm telling you, your ancestors are with you.
If you ever doubted that, let me just put that to rest. They were there, and they were there to, to guide me probably to get started on that journey, and we lived in New Mexico for a while, like I was telling you. And, my plan really was to go back and forth and spend a lot of time out there with my kids, so they could learn a lot. But as it turns out, life happens, And we just didn't make it out there nearly as much as we thought. And the whole, after my biological mother passed, that dynamic changed.
Right.
And it just, not in a bad way, but just, it's different. I still have relatives out there that I speak with on the phone and through social media, but it's just I don't have that one connection that first connection that I had there. And so I've told my children, I said, that falls on you guys.
Yeah.
To learn. And so I was going to, I've tried to plant that seed for years. I said, you guys, you're going to have to take that on yourself. And I said, I'll help, but I only know so much anyway. But you guys are going to help. And so I will say that there's many times that I've done stuff with the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes. They allow me to MC a lot of stuff, and I'm so fortunate.
You do a great job at it.
Well, thank
too.
you. I'm so fortunate to do that, and I always talk about the fact that I'm not. I let people know I'm not a tribal member out there, and then what I love is someone always says, "Hey, man, but you're adopted." And I said, "Oh yeah, you're right. Every once in a while I get a good yeah." So,
right.
That's very, man, that means something to me.
Your identity is your identity, and that's a part of that individual sovereignty, which is so important. I know your kids have been witnesses to your courage in forging your path forward, and you have inspired so many of us in our community. So I have no doubt that they will carry that on for themselves and their families as well.
Yeah, I sure hope so. We can only hope.
We have hope and optimism.
When it comes to kids, man, all you can do is push them in the right direction and hope they stay in line.
Well, they have a good leader. They have a great leader in you, as do all of us. And so, Darren Brown, thank you so much for joining me today. And it's been a real gift to have you on the show. I appreciate you and all of the important work that you do. Yakoki.
Same here. Yakoki to you, Gena.
Thank you. Yakoki. Thank you for joining us. Timber People is brought to you by the Possibilities Podcast platform.